Hi, I'm Sue Hartung. I know everybody's tired. Amy and I were just talking. We're going to try to get through this as quickly as we can. My son is Warren. He's 37, has Cat 6A. Amy has?
My son Jack is 7, and he also has Cat 6A.
So we thought we'd change things up a little bit here and just talk about some more day-to-day ideas and suggestions that might make your life a little bit easier. Every parent has, of course, the right to advocate for their child, and I would go so far as to say that you should have an obligation to advocate for your child. We have heard from so many experts today. Your life is filled with experts. Listen to them, but nobody's going to know your child like you do. So always trust your instincts. That's the first thing I'll tell you. I have never regretted anything if I was following my instincts. One thing that we forget, because we live in this Cat 6 bubble, right? But it is very rare. There's not that much of it out there. So when you go to meet new doctors or you go to meet new teachers, this is what I've started doing. I copy page 4 and 5 of the Cat 6 handbook, and I take it with me, and I leave it with the doctors, leave it with my teachers, anybody who's working with my child, because they don't know what Cat 6 is. They've never heard of it before. And these 2 pages give you a quick overview of how it's diagnosed and the common traits. I'm going to try to intersperse a couple really short real-life stories that I've had that might make some of this more real to you. And one of them, this is, our committee is actually 4 people, and Beth Woodsbury is one of them. She's up in Maine, and this is one of her big things. Always try persuasion before arguing. Try collaborating. Sue Hartung will tell you, don't be afraid to argue. My son is an adult. Every 5 years in Maryland, where we're from, the Developmental Disability Administration requires some kind of assessment to make sure he's getting the services he needs. But what that really means is you have to justify the amount that they're spending on him. So during COVID, they wanted to do an assessment. They used this SIST, which is the Support Intensity Scale, and they wanted to do it virtually. I don't think you can evaluate Cat 6 diagnosis virtually. You just have to see it to believe it. So another separate company had been outsourced to do this testing. When I called them and they said they wanted to do it virtually, I said, I won't do that. And they said, well, you have to, because DDA told us we have to do that. And I said, really? So I called DDA. They didn't know that I had sat on I had chaired their quality assurance committee. So when I got to one of the assistant directors up there, I said, what'd you tell this company? And so we told them to do whatever the families want. We had our evaluation in person, all right? Didn't have to fight, I just was firm. Different types of advocacy, group advocacy, look at our foundation. It's amazing. Amy's going to talk about educational advocacy. The next cycle I'll talk about geographic advocacy and how it affects us in just a second. Here's my citizen advocacy story. About 7 years ago in Maryland, the Developmental Disability Administration went through a reorganization that really affected my county. They said we could no longer do case management services as the county. We wrote letters, we petitioned, we went to Annapolis, they just kept saying no. I chaired a developmental disability committee at that time, and I invited the deputy director to come down, and I loaded the room pretty much like this one's loaded. It had parents, it had our local politicians, it had agency heads, and the deputy director walked in, looked around, and said, you have a contract to do case management services. If you renew it, I will sign it. That was a big win. They still talk about it. What he knew that I didn't do, that was coming next, was contact the press, which I'll talk about later on. Geographically, IDEA. IDEA says that if you suspect your child has a disability, federal law says they have to do an assessment within 60 days, right? Yeah, within 60 days. But after that assessment is done, the timeline to meet again to discuss the results of that assessment varies so much state to state. Connecticut, I think where Amy is, it's 45 days. Maryland, it's 60. California was 15. Maine, maybe it's my state's 90, I don't know. It does vary. So sometimes when people are writing into the foundation or on the Facebook page, I really suggest you try to look for people, if you're looking for specific suggestions, who live near you. Because there is some federal legislation, but a lot of it varies district to district, state to state, county to county. So the closer you are to home, probably the more information you'll get. Here's Amy.
Hi. So one thing that every family is entitled to is child find. And so the bottom line here is if a school or an educational professional or even a therapist suspects any sense of disability, it's their legal obligation to bring it up to child find. This then starts the process of determining whether or not an evaluation is necessary to then determine if a child has a disability. There are a number of different evaluation measures that are used. They definitely depend on how old the patient is, but also are state-specific. Some districts and states choose to use more, or some assessments that they're familiar with, others use different ones. They all typically assess the same area. So usually there's a cognitive piece that a psychologist will do, an educational piece that a special education teacher will do, and then there's the service providers pieces like the OTs, PTs, speech pathologists. That you can dig deeper. Visually impaired teachers can perform visual assessments, hearing, and the list goes on. So we did just provide you, I believe these slides will be shared, so I won't go over all of them, but these are just some examples of assessments that are used. These are on the left are some intelligence tests, and on the right are some widely used academic tests. And when these are done, it's the obligation of the providers who do the evaluations to then go over it with you and your family. So if you're not an educator and if you're not a psychologist, oftentimes you'll get the results and it'll be like foreign language to you. So as advocates, we encourage that no matter who is doing your evaluation, you ask for them to go over it with you and your family thoroughly before any decisions are made. You have the right as parents to fully understand what they're doing, what the results show, and you have a say. And a lot of these evaluations also include pieces of family interviews. So you will be a part of these evaluations. Sometimes there's just questionnaires, and sometimes your interview piece is embedded within the write-ups afterward. So, private schools. I'm passionate about this because my son Jack, he went to an integrated preschool program in Darien, Connecticut. It's a public school program, and he automatically was admitted into it because he had an IFSP, which is what you have before you turn 3. So because he had that, he automatically entered the special education system in Darien. At 3 years old, they re-evaluated him in the public school system, and he got what is called an IEP, which is what you get after you turn 3. It was a great experience for our family. He had every service you could imagine. We were floored by what we got. PT, OT, and speech every day for 45 minutes every day for this little boy. And then it came time to transition him into kindergarten. And Kevin and I felt, okay, maybe there's a private school out there for him, maybe not, but the school really were the ones who came to us and suggested this private school. If a school comes to you and feels that they cannot meet your child's need, and they have found what they feel is a more appropriate setting, it's called outplacement. And if your child is outplaced, it means that the school district has to legally provide the funds to pay for the private school. So since Jack is outplaced currently, we don't pay for the private school, but it is provided to him, and transportation is provided to us. It's great. It can be a really great thing. However, just because a school doesn't agree with you and you feel that it's necessary doesn't mean that you don't have the right to request funding. One thing that some families, at least in my state, haven't yet come to fully understand is that there are state-approved private schools and there are non-state approved private schools. And there's a whole logistical reason as to what makes you state-approved that I'm not going to go into. But if you find a state-approved private school that you feel would better benefit your child than the public school, you have a right to ask for them to place your child there. If they disagree with you, then you can go to mediation or due process to try to reach a settlement. And that settlement will then hopefully come to an agreeable payment plan where you can hopefully afford the private school that you're looking to go to. As an advocate for a lot of families in Connecticut, I do recommend that if you choose, sorry, this slide, I just wanted to, you can read it while I'm talking. It just talks about a little bit of different state to state. Every state is different, so you want to make sure you know your state laws. State laws are different than federal laws. But in Connecticut, if you feel really strongly that your child should go to a private school and you do not get any money from the state and you're still thinking, I can do this, I want to put my child there, I highly recommend to my families they do a unilateral placement. By simply using that term, unilateral placement, it means that you've not, and forgive me for this way of saying it, but it means that you're not fully divorcing from the district, so the district still owns your child, and you want the district to own your child. And when I say own, I mean you want them to do evaluations every 3 years for triennial reviews. You want them to hold annual reviews to review the IEP that the private school may or may not be implementing, right? Some private schools don't even follow IEPs, but you want your child to still have one because they have special education needs. If you don't use, at least in Connecticut, if you don't use the term unilateral placement, it's the divorce, so to speak, and then the district doesn't have any obligation to really do anything for you and your family after that. So it's a disservice to your child. So as Sue said from the beginning, it's all about collaboration with the districts. Yes, it can get ugly, and yes, it's not always the best situation, but you do want to work together as a team. So just some tips I have that, and Sue and I laughed about this. I think my first term here may be a Connecticut term, so if you're not familiar, FERPA stands for something fancy, and it basically is Connecticut's way of asking for a complete set of your child's records from school. So some families really don't know that you are legally bound, it is your right to ask for everything that the school does in regards to your child. You can ask for emails that teachers write to one another. If your child's name is in those emails, at least in Connecticut, you have a right to see it. So this is a big deal sometimes because we can only pray and hope that schools do right by our children. I was a teacher for a long time and I like to think I was great, but some teachers aren't. And God forbid there was an email that went around that said, oh, Sarah's really struggling here, but we'll get by, it's okay. If that was said in writing to another teacher, you can use that against a school if you ever needed to. So that's why a FERPA is very important. And then just some things that are just good practice as parents. Get a binder. I print everything out. I like paper. I know that's wasteful, but if you don't like paper, make a Google Doc with all your child's IEPs, evaluations, meeting notes, everything you can. I just always say write everything down. Hire an advocate if you need one, but as Sue said, you're your own child's advocate. You all have the tools. You're all smart, professional people. You love your kids. Just, if you have a feeling and something in your gut's not right, fight for it. Who cares what they think, right? We are fighting for our kids every day. Record your IEP meetings. That's my biggest takeaway. It's always a he said, she said game if you don't record your meetings. Even if I had a client the other day say, I don't want to record, it's going to make them not like me. I said, who cares? It doesn't matter if they like you. You want it recorded so that you can go back and listen to anything you may or may not have fully understood down the road. And districts record too, so it's not weird to ask for a recording. So up through the age of, it's at your 22nd birthday. And did we decide if this was federal 22, right? Because I know we went back and forth.
You're entitled
Through your 21st.
to the school year of your 21st birthday.
Yes, of your 20, so yes, so right up until you turn 22. So some tips we came up with as a team, the advocacy team, is just every school district has a different way of compensating. I know we spoke about compensation earlier, my second bullet here. Compensation looks different for every district. Sometimes it can be trying to make up missed hours during a school day. Sometimes it's before or after school. I've had some agreements with families and districts in Connecticut where the parents said, I don't want my child to miss more time in school and I don't have time after school. So they actually now pay the cost of private therapies that the family was already doing anyway. So the compensation can really look different town to town, state to state, but get it. If your child missed services during COVID, or any time. If a provider is, I mean, we're in a lot of OTs and PTs are not working these days, so a lot of children are missing those services, so ask for it, get compensated, think outside the box. And then the last bullet here is just trust your instincts. Again, sometimes public school is the best place for your child, sometimes a private school is, but ask questions. Jack is at a pretty great private school, but I still fight for him. I mean, I joke that they hate me because I email them every day. Like, I'm always questioning their methods. I want to know exactly what they're doing. I'm a pain in the butt, but Jack's in really good hands, and I think everyone that has seen Jack today, I mean, can we give it up for him? He's walking, like, hello. He wasn't able to do that a year ago, so fight for your kids. Sorry, my last slide, talking way too much, read less. Sue, I want you to jump in here. So after 21, you're not entitled, but you are eligible. So some states can choose to limit the extent of services that your child has been receiving up until that point, but most states continue to provide until you're 21, correct? Okay.
And for many of you, this is not pertinent yet, but it will be really important what it is. Up until 21, you are entitled. After 21, you are eligible for those services. Now, the gentleman from the educational district said transition services start at 15. I think federal law says 14. And most schools or districts will have a transition teacher, which will start working with you at age 14 to plan those services. And he did a really good job of explaining all those that entail. But what I really want to tell you is the difference between entitlement and eligibility is it will be incumbent upon you to prove to whoever's providing those services to prove that your child needs them. So that notebook Amy told you to keep, make sure you keep it up. Not just with school stuff. If you've had any medical crisis, if you've had the neighbors complain about your kid, hopefully you haven't had police or court involvement, anything that's major, keep a copy, put it in. And you can, electronic or paper, it doesn't matter, but do keep a record of it because you're going to use this to document the amount of services that you need. Every state, a federal law says that every state has to have a home and community-based waiver. This is a part of the Social Security Act. This was designed to avoid placing people with developmental disabilities in institutions. The idea behind how it's structured is to keep people in their homes and communities. How they do it does vary state to state. Some states have a Medicaid autism waiver. Maryland does. We have a 9-year waiting list. What can I say? And most communities have local programs, respite, recreation, things like that. So look at all of these and try to start thinking, at least by 14, what do you want life to look like for your child when they are no longer entitled to services? When you get the slides, you'll see that I have a page here which has Medicaid waivers state by state and how they change. One of the things I do, I was a teacher for 23 years, and now I do help with case management services in the state of Maryland. And one thing I've told parents for years is when you are asking somebody to spend money to support your child, we all like to think of our children in terms of their strengths, but not when you're asking for money. I want you to think about your worst day, and that's what you're going to portray, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because most of you have built really great support systems. I certainly did to manage my children's lives. But I also tell parents, are you just a broken leg away from you having a broken leg and that whole support system crashing? How do your kids get to school? How do you attend meetings? How do you do this? Now with our virtual world, it's a little bit easier. But really, you don't want to make your child and your family look better than they are, okay? You always play the worst card. In terms of that, in that notebook, make sure you have letters from all your children's doctors and your doctors. My husband had 2 knee replacements. I have a bad back. I asked them to document things and why it makes it hard for us to care for our children the way they need it, but doctors don't have time to write these letters. Draft the letter, send it to them, tell them they're free to edit it, but please put it on their letterhead and please sign it. I also have a daughter who has autism. I easily have 24 letters from doctors. No one has ever refused to do this for me. Get connected. Know who's making the laws where you live and how they're spending their money. Here's my second to last quick story, but it was a big one. When COVID came out, the governor of Maryland at that time had a priority list of who was going to get the vaccine. People with developmental disabilities were way down on the list. Even though our children were 3 times as likely to die from COVID as the regular people. I got in touch with a reporter from the Washington Post. He was going to have a press conference that day and reveal this list. And she wrote this story. And she had contacted me and about 3 other parents and experts on it. So she's got the story all ready to go. The press conference comes up at 5 o'clock. Somebody got to the governor. He redid the list. We're now 1B. Truly, true story. The reporter calls me, says, I have to change the whole story. So we talked. I sent her some family pictures. We made the governor look like a hero. And we went from placing below prisoners getting the vaccine to now we even had people go to people's houses if they couldn't get out to get the vaccine. So it can work. Don't be afraid. Use the press. Use it judiciously. Use it wisely. Don't overdo it. And I've provided you here a list websites you can just go to find your local legislatures. I've also provided on this list some templates of letters that you're welcome to use. They're ones that I have written to doctors, to politicians, to government. I think I've erased all my personal information. You're welcome to use it if it helps. In Montgomery County, we also did a wandering script. We give parents, when you lose your kids, and I've lost mine several times, all of a sudden, you're just panicked. So when you call 911 and you ask for help, they're going to start asking you for a description of your kid. And things where they might go, what they might like to do. So we just said, have this list prepared so you know what to say. My friend Betty lost her son Cyrus at the mall, gave a detailed description of what he was wearing, down to the color of his shoelaces. When they brought him back, they said to her, it would have helped if you told us he had bright red hair. I mean, it was just a given. She thought she knew it. And finally, I provided this. This is a list we put together in Montgomery County, the 10 top things you should know once your child is diagnosed. And it's some of things you might not think of. One of them is, most insurance companies, as long as you are getting insurance through your employer, and your child has been diagnosed with a disability since close to birth, usually the cutoff age is 26 for insurance. Most insurance companies will continue to provide insurance to your child. The catch is, they want to know before they're 26. In my particular case, my school district wanted to know by the time they were 19, and I just happened to find out. So that may be something you want to check with your insurance companies now, or as you get close there to make sure. And here's Amy's and mine email, and Beth. Beth is in Maine. Sue Carpenter, who did the quilts, is in Connecticut. A little bit of geography spread. That's it. Any questions?
You linked several things here. Where is this going to be posted?
On the
website?
On the website, because I've done this. Go ahead.
We did a presentation a few months ago, and so this exact slideshow is already posted on our website. So, and the links are live. What? YouTube. Oh, it's on YouTube. The YouTube channel. Yes.
And this will be on YouTube too.
But the Cat 6 Foundation website has the presentation with the live links in it, correct?
Thank you.
Yep, on the Family Resources tab within the site. Okay. Other questions for Sue and Amy?
What is the average time we should be waiting when we're advocating for our children in the educational system before it's just not a matter of, well, the grass must be greener somewhere else? No, the grass is greener somewhere else. Is there an average time frame where that threshold is passed?
He was asking if there was a certain time frame that you should wait as a parent before maybe determining whether or not the grass is greener, or no, yes, the grass is greener. I would say no, trust your instinct from the beginning. If right now you're feeling, or do your research, see if the grass is in fact greener. Sometimes you could just really make a much better plan where your child is, and it saves a lot of headache. But you could fight for that plan to be better, and you could fight for more services in your school. But if you find a place that really seems wonderful, fight for it now. So just, yes, always do your research before asking for something.
I would just say know what the timelines are. All right, there are certain timelines after they do an assessment or an IEP or other things where if you wait past that timeline, it can be an issue. It varies so much state to state. In Maryland, if you, or at least in Montgomery County, if you choose a private school, you can still get speech and OT if it's on your, you get a service plan, you don't get an IEP, it's diluted, they can do that. And if you want speech, PT or OT, you have to go to your home school to get those services, which means if you're working, it's almost impossible. So do your research, it's all out there, you just have to do the work.
If you don't know who to, like Sue is such an expert in her county, and I'm learning a lot from my standpoint, but if you're feeling lost or overwhelmed and you're like, I don't even know how to do the research, there are people through your public school in your county that can help you do this, that legally they have to. Find the social worker, find the school psychologist. Your child doesn't have to see them for you to have the right to ask for this. So.